From death by duffel bag to drugged-up cubs, Cocaine Bear has all the madcap energy and wackiness its title suggests. Believe it or not, it only gets more bizarre from there. In most cases, the first scene should properly set the tone for the rest of the film. And as you might expect, Cocaine Bear does it with some gusto. We open in an appropriately wagged-out fashion with a drug smuggler named Andrew C. Thornton kicking cocaine-filled duffel bags out of a plane. Not only is he super kicking coke duffels like Shawn Michaels, but he's also dancing while he does it. This lets the audience know that this is not a film that needs to be taken seriously by immediately establishing its madcap tone. The scene concludes when Thornton clonks his head on the door and falls to his doom. Bizarrely enough, this part of the film is somewhat factual to real-life events, minus the coke-fueled dancing, we think. The real Andrew Carter Thornton II was a real-life narcotics officer turned drug smuggler operating out of Kentucky. The film even shows archival news footage of the actual events right before we go into the fictional narrative. Much like the duffel bags of cocaine, this scene effectively drop-kicks you into the bear bedlam to come.
A bear did cocaine!
Cocaine Bear kicks off with a scene straight out of a Friday the 13th movie. Two tourist hikers enjoying the splendor of the great outdoors while an unseen threat lurks nearby. We meet Olaf and his wife Elsa enjoying their nature walk while discussing their upcoming wedding. It's here we get a humorous bit of dialogue where Elsa bluntly tells Olaf she doesn't want his brother's band playing at the wedding. Following this squabble, the couple spots the titular bear emerging from the trees, much to their immediate intrigue. Olaf begins taking pictures, before both of them realize that the bear isn't acting right, writhing around and headbutting trees. Before Olaf and Elsa can even blink, the bear begins approaching them with apparent malice in its eyes. They are then attacked by the bear, who proceeds to drag Elsa away to her death right in front of a horrified Olaf. After the bear mauls Elsa, it lets out a roar before the film's title card drops on the screen. The title disappears and the bear is immediately distracted by a pretty butterfly, which she chases off-screen. It's a glorious first kill that cements the film's dark sense of humor, while also establishing the momentum and tone for the rest of the film. Following Cocaine Bear's first gruesome murder, we are treated to a decade-appropriate montage of drug public service announcements. Among these PSAs are two particularly noteworthy ones: the famous "This is your brain on drugs" commercial and an anti-cocaine PSA starring Pee Wee Herman. These over-the-top PSAs help to immerse the audience in the anti-drug sentiments that were rampant in the 80s. During the decade, politicians adopted intense anti-drug platforms, introducing things like the DARE campaign and slogans like,
"Just say no."
The "This is your brain on drugs" commercial features a frying pan with some hot grease meant to represent brain-altering substances. We then see an egg introduced to the pan as a not-so-subtle metaphor for the dangers of using drugs. It's definitely silly, but nothing will ever hold a candle to Paul Rubens, in character as Pee-wee, talking about the dangers of crack cocaine. While definitely a noble goal, Pee-wee might not have been the best fictional character to trot out for that particular message. It's a bizarre yet hilarious little addition and a nice dose of nostalgia for anyone who grew up during the anti-drug messaging of the 80s. Early on in the film, we're introduced to Dee Dee, a young artist who wants to paint the rocks near a waterfall. Unbeknownst to her mother, Dee Dee and her friend Henry have skipped school and ventured off into the woods. On their wholesome little hike, the kids discover a lone brick of cocaine in the bushes and decide to pick it up. Henry begins lying that he does cocaine with his other friend all the time, leading Dee Dee to call his bluff. What ensues is a scene where two unaccompanied children do coke by eating it off a pocket knife. This, of course, does not work, and both kids immediately spit out the cocaine before continuing their hike to the falls. They then discover another brick of cocaine, but this time it appears as though someone, or something, had already gotten into it. This is revealed to be the bear, who then makes its presence known, terrifying both Dee Dee and Henry. As the saying goes, don't do drugs, kids, and these particular kids learn this lesson in the most hilarious and frightening way.
Because drugs, especially cocaine, are very, very bad.
One of the strangest things about Cocaine Bear is that the bear itself doesn't commit every act of violence in the movie. Yes, in this world, we're shown that human beings can be just as violent and destructive as drug-addled bears. Early on in the film, the two drug dealers named David and Eddie arrive at the park in search of their boss's lost cocaine. Upon arriving, David goes to use the bathroom where he is confronted by a trio of punk teens. It's mentioned just before this scene that these teens have been causing trouble around the park, much to the chagrin of Liz the park ranger. These teens very foolishly try to shake David down for his money and are subsequently boot-stomped for it. David continues whooping the teens from pillar to post, leaving them all knocked out on the bathroom floor. This scene is brutal and hilarious, and a perfect example that completely bear-free anarchy and violence also exist in this movie. Crucially, it also establishes that these dealers are a formidable force, setting up the inevitable showdown between them and the bear. Partway through the film, Dee Dee's mother Sari ventures to the park in search of her daughter and Henry. She tags along with Liz and an eccentric park inspector named Peter to locate them. After venturing deeper into the woods, the trio eventually finds Henry scared out of his mind and halfway up a tree. It's not too long before the bear re-emerges, horrifically wounding Liz before turning its attention to a hysterical Peter. While fleeing from the bear, Peter crawls for his life through some bushes before landing face first in another pile of lost cocaine. He then takes a cue from Henry and proceeds to climb another tree while Sari hides behind one. This leads to a very tense moment when Sari just barely avoids the bear's detection and its coke-fueled wrath. While Henry believes it will be safe above the ground, this turns out to be a tremendous mistake because bears can climb trees. Enticed by the scent of the cocaine all over Peter, the bear rushes up the other tree and begins violently eating him.
Why is it acting like this? Did you feed it cocaine?
After bailing on Sari, Henry, and Peter, Liz returns to the park's main building, where she encounters the remaining young teens who had encountered David previously. Both of them, equally battered and bruised, have no idea about each other's situations, with Liz assuming the teens were also attacked by the bear. Liz calls for some paramedics before they notice a noise at the door which is revealed to be the bear. In a moment of panic, Liz discharges her gun and accidentally shoots one of the teens through the head. This leaves one remaining teen who notices, along with Liz, that the bear is gone, but there are now noises coming from the roof. While the film wears its absurdity proudly, it should be credited for this scene and the following one as they showcase a decent amount of suspense before belting you upside the head with a bear attack. This tension is then broken when the bear crashes through the door's mini window and begins clawing the teen. The horrific scene left behind sets up the moment a little later on when the medics arrive to investigate the carnage. A short while after the bear attacks the park's main building, two paramedics arrive to examine the crime scene. The paramedics, Beth and Tom, venture inside where they find a complete bloodbath with Liz barely clinging to life. Many of you might recognize comedian Scott Cease from his TikTok videos, wherein he often relatably comments on the annoying pitfalls of retail work.
You just lost yourself a customer. You think I own this business?
Tom checks out a bathroom that appears to have blood pouring out from under its door, while Beth checks on Liz. Right on cue, the bear reveals itself to a horrified Tom, who attempts to close the door and quietly leave before the bear brings it down on top of him. Now trapped under the door, Tom attempts to escape as Beth loads an injured Liz into the waiting ambulance. Tom is able to free himself and board the moving ambulance before the bear gives chase, easily able to keep up with the fleeing vehicle. What ensues is a ridiculous chase sequence where Liz attempts to shoot the bear as Tom attempts to shut the door to the ambulance. The scene reaches its crescendo when the bear jumps through the air and lands on the back of the ambulance, mauling Tom and sending Liz flying out. Beth then meets her gruesome end when she crashes the ambulance into a tree. As the film nears its final act, the two remaining storylines converge at the bear's cave, where Dee Dee is being held. Sari and Henry arrive, finding Dee Dee hiding in the cave after following a trail of paint she'd left behind for them to track. This coincides with Eddie and David, joined by Eddie's dad Sid, who's played by Ray Liotta, also traveling to the cave to reclaim more of the lost cocaine. Both parties make the same shocking discovery. The bear has a set of cubs that are also hooked on cocaine. Much like their mother, the cubs are hopped up on a healthy blizzard of the white stuff, with their fur even covered in it. Later on in the climax, Sid opts to placate the cubs by throwing them another sizable brick of cocaine. Definite credit to the film's marketing team who wisely chose to keep this additional twist out of the trailers, and it makes for a nice surprise for audiences. It also ensures that the bear isn't just a one-dimensional, drug-fueled villain and gives some extra stakes for the film's big finale. Cocaine Bear reaches its epic conclusion where all truly great films should, on the edge of a cliff. Sari and the kids are now held at gunpoint by Sid, not keen on letting any witnesses get away. At the same time, Sid begins needlessly beating on the cubs for trying to nibble at his reclaimed cocaine. His comeuppance soon arrives in the form of the cub's mama, making a grand entrance on the top of the waterfall before jumping down to the cliffside to protect her babies. At this time, Sari, the kids, Eddie, and David all opt to jump off the cliff and into the waters below to escape. Sid is able to temporarily fight off the bear before accidentally gifting her with one final dose of cocaine. As he attempts to reclaim a bag dangling from the falls in one final last-ditch effort, Sid becomes tied up in the strap of the bag. Sid then begins choking as the bear slashes his guts out, which a cub then proceeds to eat. Considering this is Ray Liotta's final on-screen performance following his death in 2022, this was one hell of a way to go out. It also caps the insanity of this movie nicely, and Cocaine Bear remains bizarre and brilliant right to the very end.